So I just finished a series going through Plato's Symposium using the Hackett edition, my complete works of Plato here. And I thought it might be good to do a brief overview video. And I think at this point, it's long since an overview video already aired on my channel, somewhere in the Great Text playlist. And now I'm going to do another overview video, this time using my old notes that I dug up. These are old lecture notes from teaching, let's see, I think Berry College. I don't remember teaching the Symposium anywhere else. Clinton Community College in Waco, Texas. And then Berry College. I don't think I've taught the Symposium since then. All right. Plato Symposium, magnificent integration of literature and philosophy. So the background is Socrates and several others had given speeches in praise of love at a drinking party, a symposium. The characters include Apollodorus, the narrator, an unnamed friend of Apollodorus who barely has a speaking role at the beginning. He has asked Apollodorus about the famous symposium, and the story is told directly to this friend of Apollodorus. So he represents the readers of the symposium. Glaucon is a brother of Plato, and he had recently asked Apollodorus about the symposium, and he gets a brief speaking role in a flashback at the beginning. Aristodemus was our actual witness to the symposium. He recounted the story of it to Apollodorus. Then there's Eric, the doctor, or Eric Symmachus. He makes a speech in praise of love at the symposium. So do our next three characters. Agathon, a writer of tragedies, and the party is held in his honor. He's just performed his first successful play, and he makes a speech in praise of love, as does Aristophanes, who is a writer of comedies, not tragedies. And then there's Pausanias and Phaedrus, next four characters. Pausanias and Phaedrus, well, we'll get to that. There's nothing else to say at this time. Socrates is a philosopher, and you can think of him as the hero of the symposium. Alcibiades, well, I don't know that you should think of him as the villain, but he sure isn't the hero. He shows up to the symposium late. He makes a fool of himself, and more on him in good time. In the symposium's opening scenes, we have two events with some philosophical significance. Eric, the doctor, gives some medical advice based on his expertise in the health of the body. In Plato's dialogues, the health of the body is often used as a metaphor for the health of the soul. Eric is an expert in the health of the soul, and we later hear from Socrates. Sorry, I keep saying, no, maybe I only said it once. Eric is an expert in the health of the body, and later we hear from Socrates on the health of the soul, for which the health of the body is an image or a metaphor or an illustration. And then they decide to give speeches in praise of love while drinking in moderation, sending away the flute girl. And I think this symbolizes some sort of preference for intellectual over physical pleasure. Or maybe I shouldn't say symbolize. I think this is a conscious decision to pursue intellectual over physical pleasure, though it's unambiguous at best to what extent there's success in this decision. So the speech of Phaedrus occurs first, and Phaedrus says that love inspires virtue. It does so through two mechanisms: pride for good behavior and shame for bad behavior. And Phaedrus thinks love is more important than virtue. Virtue is best when it is bound to love. Virtue serves love. Love is the greatest. What's the line from? Is it John Lennon? All you need is love. Phaedrus seems to agree, or all you need is love and the things that serve love, like virtue. Now, these guys are talking about homosexuality. They're not talking about man-woman love, primarily, in fact, barely at all in this story. They're talking about love, but that doesn't mean they're just talking about man-man love either. Not because they talk about woman-woman love. That also barely even gets mentioned. No, they're not talking exclusively about man-man love, because while that's the normal form of romantic love or sexual love they talk about, they're also talking in this story about love of higher non-physical reality, but more on that in good time. Phaedrus and Pausanias and others definitely do talk about homosexuality. So if you don't already know, there were homosexuality customs in Athens at the time. Older men and teenage boys typically had relationships, or older men and younger men typically had relationships that included friendship and mentoring, but sometimes, not always, included uh, sexual favors. Now, does Plato approve of this? I don't think anyone can say with absolute certainty. What I can tell you is that Plato is, at a minimum, undermining some of the foundations of this aspect of Athenian culture, and maybe we'll get to more on this further down in these notes. Pausanias. Pausanias speaks after Phaedrus. Pausanias is, I would say, the gayest character in the Symposium. Phaedrus had said that virtue submits to love. Love is better than virtue. Pausanias reverses this formula. I think this is an improvement on Phaedrus' view. Love answers to virtue, not vice versa. Love is not as important as that which love loves. That's one of the major insights of the Symposium, repeated by several characters, here repeated by Pausanias. Now, Pausanias makes a distinction between two kinds of love. He calls them heavenly and common Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the Greek goddess of beauty or of love, and common Aphrodite desires the body. Common Aphrodite desires the body. Heavenly Aphrodite desires the soul. Love is not an end in itself. Love is good if we love a good thing, bad if we love a bad thing, and it's best to love the soul, like heavenly Aphrodite. So, love of a person's body without concern for character is the bad kind of love. This kind of love is shameful. And it may seem ironic that while saying these things, Pausanias is promoting pedophilia. I should probably specify that I don't think all these things fall under what we would necessarily call pedophilia in our day. I think these customs extend from literally and legally boys of a certain age to young men, where the word pedophilia would not apply. Maybe I should say Pausanias is talking about Athenian homosexuality, including some pedophilia, and Pausanias is super gay. And he wants to place limits on the practice of homosexuality in Athens, or maybe I should say he praises the limits that are already there. And he wants to make sure that lovers pursue virtue rather than sexual relations as their chief goal. And they want to love each other's souls more than their bodies. Now, keep in mind, this is Pausanias talking, a character in Plato's story. This is not necessarily what Plato himself thinks. I think it's more likely that Plato is more critical of Athenian homosexuality, and possibly of homosexuality as such, than Pausanias. It's more likely that he's more critical than that he's less critical. At any rate, Pausanias is not necessarily speaking for Plato. It's difficult to say that anyone speaks for Plato in Plato's dialogues, but if anyone does, it's probably going to be Socrates and not Pausanias. Now, Pausanias says a person should do anything for the sake of virtue. Oh, this translation is by Hackett, published by Hackett. And Pausanias is onto something. Virtue matters, but I don't think it makes sense to say you can do anything for the sake of virtue. And I don't know for sure that I'm not reading into the text, but I do find it terribly ironic that the guy who promotes Athenian homosexuality, including pedophilia to some extent, is saying you should do anything for the sake of virtue, including this. That just doesn't seem. There's something wonky about this. There's something weird here. Some things are wrong and cannot be done virtuously. It doesn't make sense to say you should do anything for the sake of virtue. Eric, the doctor, speaks next. Pausanias had distinguished between two types of love: love for good things and love for bad things. One of those is a good kind of love. The other is a bad kind of love. Eric applies this distinction to the body. The job of a doctor is to encourage right desire in the body. Love is everywhere, so is the distinction between good and bad love. And good love is oriented towards the good, which includes health and bodies. Now, with Phaedrus, we were told that love is the greatest, love is the ultimate, love is supreme, love is the point, and virtue serves love. Pausanias reversed this. Pausanias says love serves virtue, so virtue is greater than love. So what's the greatest thing? Phaedrus says virtue. Phaedrus says it's love. Pausanias says it's virtue. Eric says it's the good, where the good is understood as harmony. Love is not as important as what love loves, which is harmony, the good. The good is supreme. Phaedrus is wrong. Pausanias is right when he says love is not supreme. Pausanias is no doubt supportive of virtue, but he goes farther than, Eryximachus is no doubt supportive of virtue, but he will go farther than Pausanias in saying love is not supreme. He'll say it's not just virtue, it's the good itself, which is harmony. And probably he will say virtue is a sort of harmony, but don't quote me on that because I can't quote Eric on that. I don't know that he actually says that. That's just, I think that's the sort of thing he would probably say given the opportunity. But his speech ends, and I don't believe he has the opportunity to go that far. Or maybe he does, and I forgot. That's possible. Read the book yourself, for heaven's sake. Don't let me do all your work for you. What is supreme? In each speech of the symposium, the speech maker will say that something is supreme in life, except I'm not sure if the last speaker will, but we'll get to that. What does Phaedrus say is supreme? Love. What does Pausanias say is supreme? Virtue. What does Eric say is supreme? The good, which is a harmony among different elements. Now, I think Plato probably wants each speaker to give us a new clue as to what is supreme in life, what life is really all about. Pausanias says virtue, but doesn't tell us what it is. And he leaves us wondering whether his promotion of the Athenian homosexuality customs is entirely virtuous. Maybe virtue is this notion Eric suggests, the good and proper function and health of the soul, and virtue is a kind of harmony. We still don't even know what that looks like, but maybe we're getting closer. Now we come to Aristophanes' speech in praise of love. The translator or the editor points out that it's comic and seriously moving at the same time, and it really is. It's so great. The story from Alcibiades is that human beings were originally whole. We are not whole now. Each of us is only a half. A full human being would be two of what we are now, joined together. You know, this line about this thing people say about love as pursuing your other half, looking for your other half, or maybe someone who's been happily married for 20 years will refer to his wife as his other half or something like that. This is that idea. And the story is the story you might have heard before, although off the top of my head, I can't remember where I've seen it other than the Symposium and a reference to it in a 90s TV show. Actually, two TV shows. I think it was a crossover of Hercules and Xena the Warrior Princess. They referenced this story. Anyway, the story is the gods split us up into what we are now as a punishment for our problems, our effrontery, our rebellion, or disrespect, or something. We did something to offend the gods. Read the text. Don't make me do all your work for you. We upset the gods. They punished us. Zeus split us in two, and that's how we got to be the way we are now. And then we were not whole, and we've been looking for wholeness ever since. There's a lot more details, and I'll stop there. Go back and watch a previous video or read the book yourself. The themes of the story are that human nature is incomplete. We're broken. We spend our lives in pursuit of wholeness. Let's delete that page number there. That page number references the standalone translation of the Symposium published by Hackett. We spend our lives in pursuit of wholeness, for our desire is to be complete. Love is this pursuit of wholeness. Wholeness is the good. Wholeness is supreme. Wholeness is the ultimate. And wholeness is attained when we find the right person. And in Aristophanes' speech, he says, imagine two lovers, and imagine the god Hephaestus, the craftsman of the gods, speaks to them and offers to join them together so that they will be literally one body from now on. And isn't this what lovers want? Isn't that what they're trying to accomplish by being united in sexual intercourse? And the way Aristophanes talks, this sounds like a totally great idea, but I can't help thinking it sounds like the premise for a creepy episode of The Twilight Zone. And then there's also other issues like, what if my other half turns out to be more of a jerk than I am? Will finding that person make me whole? And is there anyone who's really, truly, and completely perfect for anyone? And what about virtue? Again, and what about harmony? What about virtue from Pausanias? What about harmony from Eric? And now wholeness from Aristophanes. Are virtue, harmony, wholeness all different pieces of the puzzle, all different aspects of the ultimate purpose of life? Now, Agathon is interesting. Agathon speaks next. He is the person the party is for, and he has some beautiful rhetoric, which you might expect from a successful author of tragic plays. His rhetoric is superb, and it's modeled after a famous rhetorician. And that's not my insight. It probably came from the editors of the Hackett edition. Anyway, Agathon praises love. Now, keep in mind, this is a polytheistic culture, and the characters in the Symposium usually refer to love as one of the gods. Love is a god, and in Agathon's analysis, and love is young and happy and beautiful and virtuous. Agathon seems to think love is itself the beauty that we seek in our lives. Love is the ultimate. Love is supreme. He's gone back, in other words, to Phaedra's view. Love is supreme. And in a way, we have had one improvement on Phaedra's speech. Agathon is explicitly praising the character of love, whereas Phaedrus mainly praised the gifts of love. Now, Socrates will question Agathon. That's the next bit of the story. Agathon praised love as if love were supreme and beautiful and good. Socrates disagrees. He does think there were some nice things about Agathon. It was a beautiful speech, and praising love itself makes more sense than just praising the gifts of love. But Socrates gives some arguments about love. All love desires, and whatever we desire is something we do not have. So when love desires beauty, it doesn't have beauty. It's desiring it because it lacks it. Also, what is good is beautiful. So if love doesn't have beauty, it can't have goodness. So love is not good, and love is not beautiful, and it's certainly not the ultimate. What love loves, what love desires, what love pursues, what love lacks is greater than love itself. Love is at best a limited lesser good as a means to an end of that which it seeks. Maybe it's not even proper to call it a good as such. So now Socrates in his own speech recalls how he had conversed long ago with a wise woman named Diotima. Now this will be a flashback within a flashback. Apollodorus is telling the story of Socrates telling the story of his talk with Diotima. Socrates says Diotima had questioned him in the same way he questioned Agathon, and he learned from her some things are neither beautiful nor ugly. Love is neither ugly nor beautiful. It's in between. It's a pursuer of beauty, and there's a middle ground between the two. Love is that middle ground, not ugly, but not having beauty. It's pursuing beauty. And there's a middle ground also between wisdom and ignorance, which we can describe as correct judgment or true belief without understanding. And some things are neither mortal nor immortal. There's a middle ground there too. Some things neither God nor human. Love is like that. It's the pursuer of immortality. Love is the in-between thing between ugliness and beauty, between human and God, between mortal and immortal, between ignorance and wisdom. Love is not the lesser thing or the bad thing in any of these, but it's not the greatest either. It's somewhere in between, and it's pursuing the greatest. Now, Plato, as is fairly well known, talks about two types of things that are real, but one is more real than the other. Two different categories of things that exist, two different worlds, as it's sometimes said. There's the physical world, and then there's the non-physical world. And you can contrast these words here, sensible and intelligible. The physical world is what we know with our five senses. Sensible doesn't mean it makes sense. Sensible means it is known to the senses. It can be sensed. Sensible in this sense means able to be sensed with the five senses. There's two worlds, the physical, sensible, and the intelligible, immaterial, non-physical world. And the second one is better. But we are distracted by the physical world. Now, we can't just learn simply directly what the intelligible world is and what is in it and what it's like. We have to be trained to understand it. We have to refocus our attentions away from lesser things. We have to learn to think about the immaterial world. We need an ascent, A-S-C-E-N-T. We need some way of climbing up the mountain towards an acquaintance with non-physical reality. Diotima's speech gives us a path of ascent up to the mountains. We can know the immaterial world. Now, before we get to that part of the speech, we also read Diotima's account of the origins of God, who is still understood as a person, and in context of Greek polytheistic theology, but not maybe I should just say polytheistic religion. I'm not sure if the word theology applies. Anyway, in the context of Greek polytheism, Diotima gives an account of love and the origins of love. But love is not a god. Love is again not fully God, but not fully human and mortal either. And never mind the backstory. Read the book for yourself of how love came to be. But love, we learn from this backstory, is a desire for what we don't have, and what we don't have, Diotima elaborates, is beauty and immortality. We pursue those things, and that's what everyone is pursuing. Everyone's pursuing beauty and immortality. And the best way to satisfy our desire for beauty and immortality is to ascend to knowledge of immaterial reality. Now, I'm wondering what I should clarify here. Immortality. I'll just clarify one thing. One of the common ways we pursue immortality is reproduction. Largely, Diotima seems to think the point of sex is to achieve some measure of immortality for yourself by reproducing from yourself. Now, Diotima, after explaining all of this and talking about how there are better and lesser ways, sounding a little bit like Pausanias, there are lower physical ways of trying to pursue immortality and higher spiritual ways of trying to pursue immortality, Diotima outlines a path of ascent to immaterial reality, loving individual bodies, then the beauty that all bodies share, then souls, and then laws and customs, and then knowledge of various kinds, and then beauty itself. What is beauty itself? Let's just say it is the ultimate reality, and it is a non-physical thing, and it is perfect beauty, not something beautiful in one respect and not in another, not something beautiful because of its physical characteristics. It is rather the source of the beauty of all beautiful things. I put something beautiful in the corner of this video, and some nice yellow frangipani flowers, because I like frangipani flowers. And the beauty of beauty itself is that of which the beautiful frangipani flowers are merely partaking, or that which they're just imitating. Beauty itself is the source of the beauty of all beautiful things, and it is complete and perfect and whole and eternal, and it's a non-physical thing, and it is, in the account of the Symposium, the ultimate reality. Now, after Socrates' speech, recounting Diotima's speech, Alcibiades shows up. Alcibiades is a historical character. Well, everyone in the Symposium, I think, is a historical character. Alcibiades was one of Socrates' proteges, or students, and he went bad. His association with Socrates was one reason Socrates had a bad reputation with some. This was part of the backstory to Socrates being accused of corrupting the youth of Athens. Alcibiades was a very promising young man. He was charming and handsome. He was a good general, a popular politician, but he went terribly wrong. He defaced some religious statues, and he betrayed Athens. And his entrance is hilarious and undignified. He's way too drunk. Alcibiades then gives a speech in praise of Socrates, not in praise of love exactly, but Socrates is identified in the Symposium as the paradigmatic lover. And Alcibiades gives a speech in praise of Socrates, which is a tribute to love as Socrates practices it, or a criticism of love, or a thoroughly hilarious and only half comprehending attack, an inaccurate attack on Socrates' way of loving. Socrates had tried to persuade Alcibiades to care for his soul more than his political career. Socrates persuaded him that he should, but Alcibiades never followed through. He lacked the strength of will to follow through, and he was ashamed as a result. And in the story, Alcibiades tells Socrates he wants Socrates to become his lover in order to teach him virtue, the sort of arrangement Pausanias would approve of, complete with the sexual favors. Alcibiades offers sex in exchange for ethical training. Socrates doesn't have any of it. Socrates isn't interested. He refuses the sex. But it looks like he's always been willing to give Alcibiades as much ethical training as he is able. Now, this is another flashback within a flashback. Also, Alcibiades is super drunk while he's telling the story. So, take it with 2 or 3 grains of salt. although he also invites Socrates to correct him if he gets any details wrong. And I don't think Socrates does correct them. So there's some level of plausibility to this story. How does Alcibiades react? What does this say about what his character is? Does he really love virtue more than sex? Or does he, I don't even know if I can say that that's his deal. Like he's into the customs that Pausanias praises, but he's also been corrupted by those customs, so he can't really do what Pausanias recommends and love virtue more than sex. If you're going to have virtue more, if you're going to have virtue privileged above sexual relations, and if this is going to be a thing in those man-boy or older man, younger man relationships that are a thing in Athens, these mentor friendship teaching relationships, if that's going to be how we do things, maybe we shouldn't include sexual favors with mentorships. Maybe that's what Pausanias is confused about, and what corrupted Alcibiades, or something like that. Maybe Socrates is called a great lover in the Symposium. What kind of lover is he? Does he actually like boys or young men? Well, I think Alcibiades explicitly says Socrates is crazy about beautiful boys, but then he also will say something like he doesn't actually care if they're beautiful. And the thing is, Alcibiades is speaking from a perspective where he likes the customs Pausanias praised. He doesn't seem to see anything weird or wrong about those customs. Socrates' perspective, as outlined in some remarks from Diotima to him, is more like this. You don't pursue, well, if you are a lover and you're interested in souls, you do pursue a relationship with boys or younger men. Remember, this is all men talking here. There's no women here except Diotima in the flashback and the flute girl who doesn't even get a speaking role. These are all men, and a number of them have, to one degree or another, some amount of homosexuality in their lives. What was I talking about? If you are a lover of young men, Diotima seems to think, you're not interested in sexual favors. What you're interested in is being a teacher. And she's basically saying something like, young Socrates, because when she had this conversation with Socrates, he was much younger. Young Socrates, I know you're kind of interested in young boys. Just don't let it be a sexual thing. Make sure you're teaching them. And that's what Socrates seemed to be interested in with Alcibiades, and it didn't work. Alcibiades didn't have the strength of will to pursue virtue under Socrates' tutelage, and he was super upset when he offered sex in return for special training in virtue. Alcibiades kind of, maybe, I think, possibly wanted to climb the higher regions of the mountain. In the ascent towards love, Alcibiades was sort of trying to do some of this higher stuff. Souls, customs, knowledge, maybe beauty itself, but he wasn't ready to let go of lower stages of the ascent, where you're interested in bodies as well as souls. Alcibiades wanted both the spiritual and the physical halves of the customs Pausanias praised, and Socrates was only interested in giving him the spiritual half, and this relationship just didn't work out. Now, I think it's very safe to say that Plato's Symposium is undermining Athenian homosexuality customs. I don't want to say they're exclusively pedophilic, but they have some pedophilia included. Now, hermeneutics is a good word. It's the art or science of interpreting texts. Art might be a better term than science. Hermeneutics is important here. There are hermeneutical issues in this Symposium. In Plato's Laws, one of his characters opposes homosexuality, apparently without nuance, or without saying, I oppose this kind but not that kind. And he seems to think it's dangerous for society. It's unhealthy for society. But in Symposium, Plato has several characters who approve of homosexuality, and we're left with the challenge of figuring out which character is closer to Plato's own views and which, if any, speaks for Plato. Plato wrote conversations about lots of things, including homosexuality. One reason for doing this is to help us learn how to think about this topic. He wants us to learn how to think Maybe I shouldn't say more, but at least as much as he wanted us to know what to think. But he does leave behind some clues that we can use to get a clearer picture of his own view. I think the character in the laws who opposes homosexuality, named the Athenian, is probably much closer to Plato's view than Phaedrus or Pausanias or Alcibiades here. My own view is Plato probably does not approve of homosexuality, but it's important to emphasize we can't be certain. And there are Plato scholars who disagree. Also, this is important, and this will not, controversial, I think. Well, I hope not. Some people want Plato to approve of homosexuality, but some of those same people will not be upset at all about this point, is what I'm getting at when I say maybe this isn't controversial. I hope not. I am very confident that the Symposium of Plato is a critique of homosexuality as it was practiced in Athens at the time. All right, now, what about ascent? Ascending to knowledge of some higher reality. A common theme in philosophical ascent literature is we can only understand the universe from the right perspective. The philosopher trains us to consider the universe from multiple perspectives, some of them higher than others. So your perspective is very important to understanding the truth, but not all perspectives are equal. And it's important to be able to understand the difference between the perspective of someone like Phaedrus, love is supreme, Agathon, love is supreme, but let's praise love's character rather than love's gifts. Pausanias, virtue is supreme. Eric, wholeness is supreme. Eric, harmony is supreme. Aristophanes, wholeness is supreme. Socrates, beauty itself is supreme. By learning to understand these perspectives and working through them, Plato is training us to think about love. Now, I'm not sure what is precisely is the perspective of Alcibiades. It's terribly confusing and subtle and hilarious. Plato is training us to think about love, and there are ways you can work to put the puzzle together. Virtue is better than love. Sexual love should submit to virtue, as Pausanias says. Virtue is the good and proper health of the soul, inspired by Eric. Virtue is a state of wholeness, inspired by Aristophanes. Wholeness and virtue are only found in attaining beauty, as Diotima says. But a person seeking beauty can be an image of virtue, and probably Socrates is that himself. Socrates is not virtuous. Socrates is a lover of wisdom, of virtue, of beauty himself, of beauty itself. Socrates is a philosopher, a lover, a pursuer, a seeker, not a haver. Philosophy is the seeking, not the having of wisdom. I don't think Socrates is virtuous. He may be an image of virtue, and no doubt better than most of us, but not virtuous himself. He is on the way. So Plato's perspectives tend to contain, Plato's works tend to contain one perspective that's higher than the others in that work. The idea is that by understanding that perspective, our minds will ascend, although that doesn't mean we're there yet. That's a partial account of the higher reality and a path of ascent upwards. Socrates' speech gives us the best perspective on love in the story, and there's this talk of directing our desires in the right direction, and love being between humans and the gods. Love is an image of philosophy, the pursuit of wisdom. Wisdom belongs to the gods. Human knowledge, as we call it, is meager, paltry. Wisdom would be much higher. Through philosophy, though, we could pursue wisdom and maybe to some extent transcend the ignorant human condition. Better to be a philosopher who lacks wisdom and lacks knowledge than to be merely an ignorant human who doesn't have anything, because the philosopher is at least on the way, and the philosopher may at least have some correct opinions without understanding. Finally, there is a common theme or motif or image in philosophical ascent literature, of which the Symposium is a superb example, a genre of which the Symposium is a superb example. We tend to go from focusing on things outside the soul in philosophical ascent literature to focusing on things inside the soul and then focusing on things above the soul. And that's the general path of ascent laid out in the Diotima. Now I'll shut up. Thanks for watching.